Okay. Damn. I was hoping for a very resounding yes. We could have had you on and live and in person. But how are you doing?
I haven't recovered. No, I'm losing my voice. Like it's either enough radio appearances slash the summer cold that nobody wants. I don't know what it is, but we're fighting through it this week. So I just need a weekend of just sipping some hot honey water
Mm.
and resting the vocal cords and not doing anything. So I'll just have to sit quietly for 48 hours. I think that's almost an impossibility for me, though.
Hey, what happened? What happened, Arkansas? I would like your try and piece this together because it's 2 days. It's 2 days later, Schaefer, and I'm still trying to figure out shortstop, left field, not pitching to a guy, walking a guy. How, 2 days later, have you been able to figure this out?
I haven't, and so here's how I would sort of rank things in terms of the most abomination to the least. Like I think the most preventable thing is that Dave Van Horn should have issued an intentional walk or really pitched away from Jones. And Brunson and I were texting about this as it happened. Like, why would you want any piece of that guy? Him at first base doesn't matter. Set yourself up with a better matchup. They still almost got out of it anyways. The second baseman for Arkansas, nearly with a terrific catch, which is almost as haunting as anything else in this whole thing. Weirdly, I would put the shortstop's play at the bottom of this list because he still got an out, though it was a questionable decision and, not particularly defensible. The only thing I can think of is his entire body was pointing towards third. And in that moment, he was just thinking, let's get one out, not force anything, or he lost track of how many outs there were.
Mm-hmm.
Even then, when that happens, you're normally going to first. Like it was bizarre. And then the guy I feel horrible for is the left fielder. I mean, I think he had a tough read and then he slips a little bit on a late break. He's caught in between and, tries to make a heroic game ending catch. The ball caroms in a way, Brooks and I had talked about this. That ball does not carom into the corner of the outfield every time. Sometimes that might just bounce right off of you and go straight down. And so it minimizes the effect of all of it. Just an unbelievably haunting sequence for a team that just seems so snake bit in Omaha. I couldn't believe it as it was happening. I really couldn't. I thought they were going to get that done. I thought we were going to have a phenomenal Thursday game. And ultimately that's not what happened. And instead we have one of the more just memorable matchups and games. I mean, the College World Series, I said this before it started this year. I feel like it's just been on fire these last couple of years. The games have been incredible. The star power has been there. The moments have been there. Now we're getting a 25-26 straight win Coastal Carolina team that isn't scared of anyone, taking on an LSU team that's played as good a baseball as anybody else here in Omaha. So it's a very fitting championship. I'm excited about all of it. Man, do I feel terrible for Arkansas. That was the sentimental pick for me. I wanted Arkansas Coastal Carolina when the draws came out, just because I thought it would be an intriguing matchup. And I wanted to see it for Dave Van Horn and for it to go that way. Just brutal. Absolutely brutal.
You talked about you're losing your voice. I'm losing my voice. Everybody's fighting through it. One group of people that is fighting through it right now are the Nebraska Cornhuskers when it comes to their 2026 recruiting class. They have a interesting crop of players visiting this weekend. I think it's 9 total, 6 of them being 4 stars. I know that they always say, hey, we just got to get them to Lincoln. And obviously this is a really good opportunity to, show what this program is to these high-level recruits and show the facilities. But at the same time, we kind of at the point now with this recruiting process where it just really just comes down to what do you do in the season?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely an element of that. Like the more success that they can have in the regular season of 2025, the easier it's going to be to flip some of these people that you weren't able to get in the month of June here so far. I also think it's about making sure that you are maximizing what this class is. I think it's critically important for Nebraska you've got a guy like Danny Odom that you've been thought to be a little bit of a favorite for. I think it's important for Nebraska and Addison Williams to prove that they can close this recruitment out. You have Claude Mpuma, who I think Nebraska is a dark horse for, the offensive lineman out of Chicago, where you have Auburn and Florida in that battle. I think Nebraska has a real chance to show him a great weekend. We need to see them close on a few recruits. I know it's difficult, and I know you're having to go against other great teams, but other people are able to get commitment. Syracuse is able to shut down Cameron Wilson. This is where, and maybe it's an NIL thing. Maybe it's we need to see success from Nebraska thing. I don't really care. It's their job. They got to go get talent. Nebraska hasn't had a single commitment for any one of its new assistant coaches in this entire cycle, guys. They don't have one. Addison Williams doesn't have a commitment to his name. Terry Braden doesn't have a commitment to his name. I know Phil Snow and Mike Eckler and Dana Holgerson aren't there to recruit, but there's nothing from them either. Dykeel Shorts doesn't have a commitment to his name. It's June. It's time for them to finish some things off. This is a big weekend. And this class doesn't have to be in the 70s when it's all said and done. And there's a lot that can still happen between now and signing day. But at some point they have to be able to show that they can do it. We know they've won big recruiting battles in the past, so it's not like it's impossible for this staff, but it's one of these things where right now it's at the point where it's like, okay, you missed on a whole bunch of guys, grab what you can, do not take any reaches, and just go to the transfer portal and see what the flip season looks like, because it's been a pretty rough summer, and I can't promise it's going to get a whole lot better. So they do have a decision today with Luke Sorensen. That looks pretty good for Nebraska. We'll see what happens moving forward.
Their best recruiter, their head coach, and you kind of understand what I'm saying. Everybody go, well, it should be, but sometimes head coaches aren't great recruiters. Is their best recruiter Matt Rule?
Are you saying Bo Pelini wasn't a great recruiter? Is that what you're trying to say, Gary?
Nope.
Yeah, I would say Matt Rule's probably their best recruiter. I mean, it could be Rob Dvorak. I think he's had a lot of success, and obviously they don't have to take a lot of linebackers. They could end up with Calvin Thomas, the guy that they've been chasing a little bit here, and that might be his contribution for the cycle. But it's hard to say who their best recruiter is. Their best recruiter was Garrett McGuire. For as much as people wanted to make fun of him for being a young coach and wanted to lay blame on everything that happened last year as if it was his fault that Isaiah Nair can't catch a pass that hits him in the hands, or that guys weren't blocking to the best of their abilities, whatever. But what walked out of town when you lost Garrett McGuire was your best recruiter. Go look at wide receiver recruiting from last year to where they're at right now. It's a pretty stark difference. So yeah, I think it's Matt Rule. I think there's a lot of guys that kind of have to prove what they can do. I think EJ Barthel, for 3 cycles, hasn't hit on their top running back target. Maybe Jamarian Parker was right there in that mix too. But there's just a lot of guys where you'd like to see more. You'd like to see Nebraska do better. And they have a lot of eggs in the 2027 basket, which means you got to win football games in 2025. But they're flirting with some really high risk stuff, because if this doesn't work, Nebraska doesn't win enough games in 2025, that 27 recruiting cycle and 2026 portal class is just going to be desperation. It's going to be real stinky in Lincoln.
So, I mean, talking about desperation and in general, you definitely don't want to get to the point where you're desperate in the portal, right? You want to have that balance between, hey, we have a good high school recruiting class, but we want to add additional pieces in the portal. But you talk about closing, and they've talked to top guys, and they've brought in some really good recruits, and we've heard some good words about what they've done and what they've said to them. But at the same time, they haven't been able to close the door. Is there anything that you can just pinpoint to it specifically, or is there any way to just do? Is there really an answer to why haven't they been able to shut the door on some of these guys?
I think Nebraska's been more judicious than most about how they want to spend their NIL in this cycle. I don't think they want to overpromise and underdeliver. Matt Rule's been pretty straightforward about that. They might be pushing things into the next year where they think they have a better chance in the 2027 class to land some really impact guys. But that shouldn't prevent them or preclude them from being able to add some some pieces here in a small class and use the scarcity for that. A lot of it to me is that you're in this window where you have this momentum and you have these facilities and there's some enthusiasm about what you're doing. You can't be selling hopes and rainbows in year 4.
Yeah.
You need to be able to sell results. And so that's why, like, even if this recruiting class isn't exactly as they want, and even if the NIL has been somewhat difficult for them to figure out, this can't just be a cycle that gets punted entirely. And I don't think they intend to, but it hasn't went how they've wanted. And I don't think the organization has been particularly great because you stacked a bunch of visits late in June and then never got some of those guys to campus because they committed before you even had a chance to host them. So I don't know. I think Nebraska has to take a long look at how they organize things this June. If they can't have it happen like this again, they really can't.
Hey, has there been any, and I mean any mention of Trey Taylor reclassifying? Because I haven't, you and I have been around guys a long time that commit to Nebraska a ways out, and then they go into peer recruiting. I can't recall a kid on this level that is so all in. I mean, they already got him on a nutrition plan from Nebraska on how he's going to put on weight. He's here every weekend in June. Would it be more beneficial for him to be a redshirt in 26 or a senior playing high school football in Illinois?
I don't know which is going to be more beneficial. I have asked about this, and a month ago, the feeling was there hadn't been any talk of that, and so if it is, that's heavily under wraps. I mean, I think if you could make it work, it might be okay. I also sort of think if you're Nebraska, there's really not a big reason to rush to get him here. From an NIL standpoint, you're probably going to be able to offer him more in 27. I think they I think they want to see what they have on their roster. Like I know that it's, and I've talked about this too. You see who's likely going out the door in 27 in Raiola. You have a new 4-star quarterback that upper echelon of the college football recruiting ranks. You hold on to him. The theory is that he should be able to come in and do what Dylan did, except it's just not how it always works. Yeah. And so I think some of it is you want to see what a TJ Lateef is, or Marcos Davila, or, you want to see what Dayton Raiola is. And so I don't know that they're necessarily in a big hurry to move him up. Plus, if 2027 is where you're going to fire all your guns in recruiting, you've already got an ace in the hole of your quarterback who's helping you with Ahmad Hudson and some of these other guys. And so I can understand where there's a definite benefit to getting here, getting your feet wet, understanding how that's all going to work. And then in the spring of 27, you're right there in that competition. So it's not that doesn't make sense. It's also, there's an element of this where I think that it also works for Nebraska to just sit tight and for Trey Taylor to sit tight and see how things play out. And so, I haven't heard any mention of it. I have asked around because I think you and I have sort of talked about it, off air. But it from who I have heard from, nothing about reclassification so far.
There's and by the way, Mike Schaefer of Huskers 24/7. There definitely is an excitement about this staff from an on-field perspective heading into this year with, who they've hired and the experiences that they have. But Gary's talked about it a little bit about having an ace recruiter and maybe the lack of that in the current, football program. And I agree with that. And you've now just kind of mentioned none of their new hires have, a recruit to their name right now. Is it safe to say that they might have sacrificed their ability to recruit for the ability to coach on Saturdays?
No, I don't know that I would say that because we don't know what Terry Bradner is. I mean, he spent all of January working with the Chiefs for the next Super Bowl run. Like his only recruiting run was late April through May, and he hasn't had the time to build the contacts. So I don't think it's that these guys can't. It's that in this new sort of world of when the coaching cycle hits, for Nebraska to hire multiple coaches in the same cycle, and Holgorsen, Snow, and Mike Eckler, and none of them were going to bring you anything with them in the transfer portal, and really none of them are going on the road in terms of recruiting for you, then you needed to probably get more from Shorts, who was in the college game. And Dane Key, you could argue, is as big of a get as Nebraska could have brought in for a wide receiver after the 2025 signing class. But I just think they're going to need a little bit of time, but it just shows you, like, when you change coaches, you can really lose a lot of what you have going for you. I mean, I don't know if Nebraska is going to sign a high school defensive lineman in this class. Can you name one target that's on the board for him that isn't committed elsewhere? I mean, it's not exactly a wash with it. And then the thing is, it's not like you want to run out there and just go grab someone, because you're not going to be able to squeak him by on the grandfather limits and that NIL money that might be going to somebody else. So you have to be smart about what you're doing. It's just a very odd cycle. And I think Nebraska is kind of punting some things down the road, which means they're betting really heavily on success in 2025.
We can chat on this. CC or LSU?
I'm going to go Coastal Carolina. That was I thought the winner was coming out of the Coastal Carolina-Oregon State run of things there. So the fact that Louisville took out Oregon State was surprising to me. And then Coastal Carolina's just been on a good run. I mean, they just spashed Auburn like it was nothing. So I'm excited for this, though. It should be a fun one.
Hey, you get to see Kate Anderson pitch tomorrow night. He feels like the number 1 overall pick, doesn't he?
Very well could be. It's like I said, it's been a great run for the CWS. You look at some of these guys you've had come through and are going to be, top 10 picks and College World Series alumni. It's a good time for college baseball right now. Feels like a very healthy sport.
During for the semifinals, the last 4 teams, there was a total of 6 guys who were projected to go in the first round of the MLB draft. So the talent definitely shaping up in college baseball, and it's great we get to see him here at the CWS. Schaefer, always great to talk to you and see you. I'll see you soon, my man.
All right, guys, have a good one. Enjoy the weekend, and we will chat next week.
Thank you.
All righty, Mike Schaefer. And before